The howling wind whipped across the Sierra Nevada mountains as snow battered the frozen landscape, obscuring everything in a blinding white veil that threatened to swallow any soul unfortunate enough to be caught in its fury. She stumbled forward, one faltering step after another, her fingers blue with cold, her mind empty of everything but the instinct to survive. December 1876 had brought the harshest winter anyone in Genoa, Nevada could remember. The small settlement nestled at the eastern base of the mountains was accustomed to winter's bite, but this storm had teeth unlike any other. Most folks had the good sense to stay indoors, tending to fires and family as the blizzard raged, most folks, except for Nathan Quinn. Nathan pulled his sheepskin coat tighter around his broad shoulders as he urged his horse, Boone, through the deepening snow. At 32, he'd spent enough years on these trails to know better than to ride out in weather like this. But the cattle in the north pasture wouldn't survive without feed, and he wasn't a man to let animals suffer, no matter the personal cost. "Just a bit further, boy," he murmured to the horse, his voice instantly swallowed by the wind. "Then we'll head back to the ranch." The day was fading fast, the already dim winter light growing fainter behind the curtain of falling snow. Nathan had just decided to turn back when Boone suddenly balked, ears pricking forward, nostrils flaring. "What is it?" Nathan followed the horse's gaze, squinting through the swirling white. At first he saw nothing but the endless snow. Then a darker shape emerged, something that didn't belong in this wilderness of white. Someone was lying half-buried in a snowdrift. "Hold steady," Nathan commanded, sliding from the saddle. He trudged through knee-deep snow, reaching the crumpled form in seconds that felt like hours. It was a woman. Young, from what little he could see of her face beneath a frost-coated scarf, her eyelashes were crusted with ice, her lips tinged an alarming shade of blue. She wore a fine traveling coat, now torn and sodden, and boots that had never been meant for this terrain. "Madam," Nathan touched her shoulder gently, then with more urgency when she didn't respond. "Madam, can you hear me?" To his immense relief, her eyelids fluttered. When they finally opened, he found himself staring into eyes the color of a summer sky, disoriented, frightened but alive. "You're all right," he said, already shrugging out of his coat to wrap around her. "I've got you." Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. She tried again, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Where am I?" "Middle of nowhere in the worst storm of the decade," Nathan replied, helping her sit up. "Can you tell me your name?" The woman's brow furrowed with concentration, then panic bloomed across her features. She clutched at his arm, her fingers surprisingly strong despite their bluish tint. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know my name. I don't remember anything." Nathan's heart sank. Exposure could do strange things to a person's mind, but this was troubling. He looked around, nothing but snow in every direction. No sign of a coach, horse, or traveling companions, just this woman, alone and lost in the wilderness with a mind as blank as the snow around them. "We need to get you warm," he said, decision made. "My ranch isn't far. Can you ride?" When she nodded uncertainly, he helped her to her feet. She swayed dangerously, and he caught her against his chest, surprised by how little she weighed despite her layers of clothing. "I've got you," he repeated, more gently this time. "I'll help you remember, help you find home." Her eyes, still wide with fear and confusion, met his. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan settled her on Boone, then mounted behind her, cradling her against his chest to share what warmth he could. As they began the slow journey back to Quinn Ranch, the stranger in his arms shivered violently, then went still, her consciousness fleeing again. "Stay with me," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Just stay with me." The Quinn Ranch came into view just as Nathan feared his strength might give out. The two-story farmhouse stood sturdy against the storm, warm light glowing from the windows like a beacon guiding them home. The barn loomed nearby, and beyond that, the bunkhouse where his ranch hands would be weathering the storm. "Mrs. Fenton?" Nathan called as he carried the unconscious woman through the front door, snow swirling in behind them. "Mrs. Fenton, I need help." Martha Fenton appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. The housekeeper had been with the Quinn family since before Nathan was born, and at 65 she still ran the household with military efficiency. Good heavens! She exclaimed, taking in the sight of the frost-covered woman in Nathan's arms. "What have you gone and found, Mr. Quinn?" She was out in the storm. "Nearly buried," Nathan explained, carrying his burden toward the parlor where a fire blazed in the hearth. "She's freezing and she can't remember who she is." Mrs. Fenton's face creased with concern. "Put her on the settee by the fire. I'll fetch blankets and heat some broth." She hesitated. "Should I send for Doc Palmer?" Nathan shook his head. "Not in this weather. The doc would never make it from town. We'll have to do what we can for her tonight and hope the storm breaks by morning." As Mrs. Fenton bustled away, Nathan gently laid the woman on the settee. In the warm glow of the fire, he got his first good look at her. Despite the paleness of cold, he could see she was beautiful, with delicate features and dark blonde hair escaping from beneath her ruined hat. Her clothing was fine, not the practical garments of a frontier woman, but the fashionable attire of someone from back east. A lady of means, by the looks of it, though what such a woman was doing alone in a blizzard was beyond his understanding. Her eyelids fluttered again as warmth began to penetrate her frozen limbs. This time when she opened them, recognition flickered in their depths. "You found me," she whispered. "I did," Nathan confirmed, crouching beside her. "Do you remember anything yet? Your name?" She started to shake her head, then winced as if the movement caused her pain. "No, nothing before the snow, just endless white." Fear crept into her voice. "Why can't I remember?" "Sometimes the mind protects itself," Nathan offered, though he was no doctor. "The cold, the fear it might have been too much. Your memories might come back once you're warm and rested." Mrs. Fenton returned with an armload of blankets and quilts. "We need to get these wet things off her," she announced practically. "Mr. Quinn, if you'll excuse us." Nathan nodded and rose to his feet. "I need to see to Boone and check on the hands anyway. I'll be back shortly." Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating. Nathan worked quickly, unsaddling Boone and rubbing him down before trudging through the snow to the bunkhouse. The ranch hand's 5 men who'd stayed on through the winter were relieved to see him return safely and listened with interest to the story of the mysterious woman. "You think she's running from something, boss?" asked Jed, the oldest of the hands at 47, "or someone," added Frank, always suspicious by nature. "No way to know," Nathan replied, "but she needs help and that's what we'll give her until we learn otherwise." By the time he returned to the house, Mrs. Fenton had the mystery woman settled comfortably by the fire, wrapped in several layers of blankets. Her wet clothes had been replaced with one of Mrs. Fenton's nightgowns and a thick wool robe that had belonged to Nathan's late mother. "She's taken some broth," Mrs. Fenton reported in a low voice. "Still no memory, poor thing, but at least her color's better." The woman looked up as Nathan entered, a tentative smile touching her lips. "Your housekeeper says you're Nathan Quinn and this is your ranch." Nathan nodded, settling into the armchair across from her. "That's right, Quinn Ranch, about 7 miles outside of Genoa. Been in my family for nearly 20 years now. Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Quinn. Nathan, please." He studied her face, noting that her eyes were clearer now, though still shadowed with confusion. "We need to call you something, until your memory returns." She glanced down at her hands, which were no longer blue but still bore the redness of recovering circulation. "I don't know what name would suit me." Mrs. Fenton, who had been hovering nearby, spoke up. "If I might suggest." There was a little silver locket around her neck. Inside is an engraving that says to S with all my love. Perhaps her name starts with S. The woman's hand flew to her throat, where indeed a silver locket now rested outside the borrowed robe. "I didn't even realize I was wearing it," she murmured, opening it with trembling fingers. Inside was the inscription Mrs. Fenton had mentioned, but nothing more, no miniature portrait, no clue to her identity. "S," she repeated softly. "It's something at least." "Sophia," Nathan suggested. "Sarah, Susannah," a flicker of something not quite recognition, but not rejection either crossed her face at the last name. "Susannah," she repeated. It could be, it doesn't sound wrong." "Susannah it is then," Nathan said, "at least until we learn differently." But what of my surname? I must have one. Nathan considered this. For now, let's say Winters, Susannah Winters. Seems fitting, considering how I found you. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Susannah Winters. Very well. Mrs. Fenton excused herself to prepare dinner, leaving Nathan alone with the newly named Susannah. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. You must have questions, Susannah finally said, about how I came to be out there alone. Many, Nathan admitted, but they can wait until you're stronger. She shook her head stubbornly. I've been trying to piece it together, but there's nothing before the snow. I remember cold and fear, and then, you, her voice faltered. What will become of me if my memory never returns? The vulnerability in her question struck Nathan to the core. One day at a time, he said gently. First, you recover your strength, then we'll try to find out who you are. There must be someone looking for you, and if there isn't, Nathan had no answer for that. Instead, he changed the subject. Are you hungry? Mrs. Fenton makes the best stew this side of the Sierras. Susannah accepted the deflection with a small nod. I find I'm ravenous, actually. Over dinner, served on trays in the parlor since Susannah was still too weak to make it to the dining room, Nathan told her about Genoa and the surrounding area. Founded in 1851 as the first settlement in what would later become Nevada, the town had grown modestly over the years. It boasted a hotel, several stores, a school, and even a newspaper. The stage comes through twice a week, weather permitting, Nathan explained, though it won't be running again until this storm passes. Do many people travel through here? Susannah asked, clearly wondering if she might have been a passenger. Some. Mostly folks heading to Virginia City for the silver mines or travelers going between California and points east. Nathan watched her face carefully. Does any of that sound familiar? Susannah concentrated, then sighed with frustration. No, nothing. She set down her spoon, her appetite apparently gone. What if I've done something terrible? What if I'm running from the law? Nathan couldn't help but chuckle at that. I seriously doubt that. How can you be so sure? Well, for one thing, your hands, he nodded toward them. They've never done a day's hard labor, and for another, ladies who have done something terrible don't generally wear French perfume. Susannah blinked in surprise. I'm wearing perfume, just traces now, but yes, and it's expensive stuff. At her questioning look, he added, my mother was partial to fine perfumes, one of the few luxuries she allowed herself out here. Susannah caught the past tense immediately. She passed 5 years ago, my father 3 years before that. He didn't add that their deaths, coming so close together, had nearly broken him, that he'd thrown himself into the ranch work as the only way to keep moving forward. I'm sorry, Susannah said softly. You must miss them terribly. Every day, Nathan cleared his throat. But I'm fortunate to have Mrs. Fenton. She's been like family since before I was born. Susannah smiled. She's formidable. I believe she would have gone out into the storm herself to check on the cattle if you hadn't returned when you did. That she would have, Nathan agreed with a laugh. By the time they'd finished eating, Susannah's eyelids were drooping despite her efforts to stay awake. Nathan could see exhaustion written in every line of her body. You need rest, he said, rising to take her tray. Mrs. Fenton has prepared the guest room for you. It's up the stairs, but I can carry you if you're too tired to walk. I think I can manage with some assistance, Susannah replied, though she swayed slightly when she stood. Nathan steadied her with a hand at her elbow, and together they made their way slowly up the stairs. The guest room was warm and inviting, with a fire already blazing in the small hearth and the bed turned down invitingly. Mrs. Fenton put a warming pan between the sheets, Nathan said. It should be nice and cozy. You're both so kind, Susannah murmured, suddenly looking close to tears. I don't know how I'll ever repay such generosity to a stranger. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Susannah Winters, Nathan said, using the name they'd chosen to try to bring her comfort. And there's no debt between us. Anyone would have done the same. But as he bid her good night and closed the door behind him, Nathan wondered if that was true. There was something about Susannah that called to him, something beyond the mystery of her identity or the circumstances of finding her. A connection he couldn't explain but couldn't deny either. Shaking his head at his own fanciful thoughts, Nathan headed back downstairs to discuss plans with Mrs. Fenton. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, at least, everyone under his roof was safe from the storm. Morning arrived with startling brightness, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Sunlight sparkled off the fresh snow, creating a blinding landscape of white that stretched as far as the eye could see. Susannah woke disoriented, momentarily panicked as she stared at the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back: the snow, the cowboy who'd rescued her, the terrifying blank space where her memories should be moving gingerly. She sat up in bed. Her body ached in places she hadn't known could ache, but the bone-deep cold was gone, replaced by the warmth of the room and the thick quilt covering her. On a chair nearby lay a dress simple but clean, obviously well worn but carefully mended. A soft knock came at the door and Mrs. Fenton entered, carrying a tray with steaming tea and toast. "Good morning, Miss Winters," she said briskly. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, thank you," Susannah replied, finding it strange to respond to a name she wasn't sure was her own, though still rather sore. "To be expected after what you've been through." Mrs. Fenton set the tray across Susannah's lap. "I've left one of my dresses for you. It might be a bit large, but it'll do until we can sort something better." She nodded toward a door on the far wall. "There's a washroom through there with hot water waiting. Mr. Quinn thought you might like to freshen up once you've had your breakfast." "Mr. Quinn is very thoughtful." Mrs. Fenton's eyes softened. "That he has been looking after others since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." She straightened, resuming her efficient manner. "He's ridden into town to fetch Doc Palmer now that the roads are passable, should be back by midday." After Mrs. Fenton left, Susannah ate her simple breakfast with surprising appetite, then made her way to the washroom. The hot water felt heavenly against her skin, and as she bathed, she examined herself for clues to her identity. There was a small scar on her left palm from what, she couldn't recall. Her fingers were slender, her nails well kept. No wedding ring, she noted, though there was a slight indentation on her right ring finger, as if she normally wore some kind of band there. When she returned to the bedroom and put on the borrowed dress, she found it was indeed too large, particularly around the waist, but a bit of careful tucking and a borrowed shawl made it presentable. Her own boots, now dried beside the fire, completed the ensemble. Feeling somewhat more human, Susannah made her way carefully down the stairs. The house was quiet, with no sign of Mrs. Fenton. She took the opportunity to explore, moving from the entryway into what appeared to be a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on cattle ranching, local history, and surprisingly, several shelves of classic literature. A large desk dominated one corner, papers neatly stacked on its surface. On the wall hung several framed photographs, a stern-looking older man standing beside a smiling woman, both dressed in their finest. A younger version of Nathan astride a horse, grinning at the camera, a family portrait showing Nathan as a boy between the same two adults. "Those are my parents," Nathan's voice said from behind her. Susannah startled, turning to find him standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands, snowmelt dampening his coat. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, no need to apologize," he said, stepping into the room. "You're welcome anywhere in the house." He nodded toward the photographs. "Thomas and Alina Quinn. They came west in '57 when I was 13, built this place from nothing but determination and hard work. They look like good people," Susannah said softly, "the best." Nathan hung his hat on a hook by the door. "Doc Palmer's with me. He's just seeing to one of the hands who took a fall yesterday, then he'll come have a look at you." Anxiety fluttered in Susannah's chest. "Do you think he might know why I can't remember? If anyone would, it's Doc. He's been patching up the folks around here for 30 years. Nathan's gaze softened as he took in her nervous expression. "Try not to worry, whatever happens, you're not alone in this." The simple assurance touched Susannah deeply. "Thank you," she whispered, "Doctor." Palmer arrived minutes later, a white-haired man with kind eyes and a reassuring manner. He examined Susannah thoroughly, checking for signs of frostbite, listening to her lungs and gently probing her scalp. "Ah," he said, his fingers finding a tender spot on the back of her head. There's a good-sized lump here. Did you know about this, Miss Winters? Susannah winced at his touch. No, I hadn't realized. A head injury could certainly explain the memory loss, Dr. Palmer said, stepping back. From the location and size, I'd guess you fell and struck your head, perhaps on ice or a rock. The cold exposure wouldn't have helped matters. Will my memory return? Susannah asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her since she'd opened her eyes in the snow. The doctor's expression turned cautious. It's possible, even likely given time, but I can't promise when or if the recovery will be complete. He patted her hand kindly. The mind is a mysterious thing, my dear. Sometimes memories return all at once, sometimes in fragments, sometimes not at all. The best thing you can do is rest, avoid further injury, and try not to force the memories. It wasn't the answer Susannah had hoped for, but at least there was some explanation for her condition. She thanked the doctor, who promised to return in a few days to check on her progress. After the doctor left, Nathan found Susannah in the parlor, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. Doc asked around town, he said, joining her at the window. No reports of missing women, no abandoned carriages found, no strangers asking after anyone matching your description. So I truly am a mystery, Susannah murmured. For now, Nathan agreed. But I've sent telegrams to Carson City and Virginia City. If anyone's looking for you, word will spread. And if no one is, Nathan turned to face her. Then you'll stay here as my guest until you're well enough to decide what you want to do next. The generosity of the offer overwhelmed Susannah. I can't impose on you like that, she protested. Surely there's a hotel in town or a boarding house. The Genoa Hotel is fine enough for travelers passing through, but it's no place for a lady recovering from injury, Nathan said firmly. Besides, Mrs. Fenton would never forgive me if I sent you away. She's already planning menus to put some meat on those bones, as she puts it. Despite her concerns, Susannah found herself smiling. She is rather determined. Stubborn as a mule, Nathan agreed with affection, and speaking of Mrs. Fenton, she's insisting you join us for a proper dinner tonight if you feel up to it. She's been cooking since sunrise. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Susannah assured him. That evening marked the beginning of a new routine at Quinn Ranch. As the days passed, Susannah grew stronger. The dizzy spells that had plagued her initially receded, and her strength returned enough that she began helping Mrs. Fenton with light household tasks, eager to contribute something in return for the Quinn's generosity. Nathan, for his part, found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire with Susannah more than he cared to admit. She was quick-witted and well-read, evidenced by her knowledge of literature and history, though frustratingly unable to recall how or where she'd acquired such education. They would discuss books from his shelves for hours, debating characters' motivations and authors' intentions with an enthusiasm that made Mrs. Fenton shake her head in bemusement. Never seen two people get so worked up over made-up stories, she commented one evening as she brought them coffee. A week after Susannah's arrival, Nathan suggested she might like to accompany him on his morning ride around the property. The fresh air would do you good, he said over breakfast. And Daisy is the gentlest mare in the stable. She'd be perfect for someone who hasn't ridden in. Well, who might not remember riding? Susannah hesitated. I'm not sure. I'll be with you the entire time, Nathan promised, and we'll stay close to the house. Something about his eager expression made it impossible to refuse. Very well, Susannah agreed. Though you may regret it if I turn out to be completely hopeless on horseback. An hour later, they were riding side by side across the snow-covered pasture near the ranch house. To Susannah's surprise and Nathan's obvious delight, she took to the saddle naturally, as if her body remembered what her mind could not. You've definitely ridden before, Nathan observed as she easily guided Daisy around a fallen branch. And not just for Sunday outings in the park, either. You've got good hands and a solid seat. Susannah laughed, enjoying the unfamiliar but exhilarating sensation of controlling the powerful animal beneath her. Perhaps I was a circus performer in my previous life, or the daughter of a horse breeder, Nathan suggested more practically. Either way, it's another clue to who you are. They rode to the top of a small rise that afforded a view of the entire Quinn property. The ranch house sat nestled in a protected valley, with the barn and outbuildings clustered nearby. Beyond stretched fenced pastures, now mostly empty as the cattle had been moved to sheltered areas for the winter. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose majestically against the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful," Susannah breathed, taking in the vista. "Most days I think so too," Nathan agreed. "Though I admit there are times, especially in February when the wind howls for weeks on end, that I question my father's wisdom in settling here." "Where would you go if not here?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I visited San Francisco once, about 8 years back. Liked the energy of the place, the sense that anything was possible, but I missed this." He gestured at the open space around them. "The quiet, the stars at night, the feeling of being connected to the land." "It sounds as if you're exactly where you belong then," Susannah said softly. Nathan's eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. "Most days I believe that." Something in his gaze made her heart beat faster, and she looked away, suddenly flustered. "We should head back," she said. "I promised Mrs. Fenton I'd help her with the mending this afternoon." As they turned their horses toward home, Susannah found herself wondering about the life she couldn't remember. Had there been someone who looked at her the way Nathan had just now, as if she were something precious and rare? And if so, why weren't they searching for her? The next day brought a fresh snowfall and news from town. Nathan returned from collecting supplies with an intriguing possibility. The telegraph operator mentioned a stagecoach that was reported missing about 2 weeks ago, he told Susannah as they sat in the study that evening. It was traveling from Placerville to Virginia City, but never arrived. With all the snow, no one's been able to search the mountain passes properly. Susannah felt a glimmer of hope. Do they know who was aboard? A businessman from Sacramento, a drummer selling sewing machines, and a woman traveling alone. Nathan watched her face carefully. A Mrs. Susannah Walker, according to the passenger manifest. "Walker," Susannah repeated, testing the name. "Susannah Walker, not Winters." She closed her eyes, concentrating. "It doesn't feel familiar, but then neither did Winters. At least the first name was close." "There's more," Nathan said. "Mrs. Walker was described as a young widow traveling to Virginia City to take up a position as a schoolteacher." "A widow," Susannah's hand went to the locket at her throat. "And a schoolteacher. That would explain my knowledge of literature and history, I suppose." Nathan nodded. "The timing fits, and so does the general description. The stage would have been crossing Carson Pass around the time of the big storm. But if I was on that stagecoach, what happened to the other passengers, to the driver and the coach itself?" Susannah's brow furrowed with concentration. "Surely I didn't walk all the way to where you found me." "That's what's puzzling," Nathan admitted. "You were a good 15 miles from the pass with nothing but wilderness between. Even if the coach crashed and you somehow survived, it's hard to imagine anyone walking that distance in a blizzard, especially someone injured." "Unless I wasn't thinking clearly," Susannah suggested. "If I hit my head in the crash, I might have wandered in confusion." "It's possible," Nathan agreed, though he sounded doubtful. "In any case, they're organizing a search party as soon as the weather allows. If the coach is found, it might provide more answers. And if Mrs. Walker had belongings with her letters, a journal they might help me remember," Susannah said, clinging to the possibility. Nathan hesitated before asking his next question. "If you are Mrs. Walker, the widow, do you think you might remember your husband?" Susannah closed her eyes, trying to summon any feeling, any echo of a memory about a husband. There was nothing but blank emptiness where such important memories should be. "I don't feel like a widow," she finally said. "Shouldn't I feel grief, or at least some sense of loss?" "Not necessarily if the memories themselves are gone," Nathan pointed out gently. "Or perhaps the marriage wasn't a happy one." The thought made Susannah uncomfortable for reasons she couldn't articulate. "I hope that's not the case," she murmured. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in thought. Finally, Nathan spoke again. Regardless of whether you're Mrs. Walker or someone else entirely, nothing has to be decided immediately. You're welcome here for as long as you need." Susannah smiled gratefully, though a part of her wondered how long she could justifiably impose on the kindness of this man who owed her nothing. Another part, a part that grew stronger with each passing day, wondered if she truly wanted to discover a past that might take her away from Quinn Ranch, and the sense of belonging she'd begun to feel there. The search for the missing stagecoach began 3 days later when a break in the weather coincided with the arrival of a U.S. Marshal who'd been sent to investigate the disappearance. Nathan volunteered to join the search party, a decision that filled Susannah with conflicting emotions. She was grateful for his commitment to helping her discover the truth, but terrified of what that truth might be and of the dangers the search party might face in the treacherous mountain passes. "Be careful," she urged as he prepared to leave, checking his saddlebags one final time. "The mountains are still dangerous. I know these trails better than most," Nathan assured her, "and Marshal Davis has done this kind of work before. We'll be fine." Still, Susannah couldn't shake her sense of foreboding as she watched him ride away with 5 other men. Mrs. Fenton, noticing her distress, kept her busy with household tasks, but Susannah's thoughts remained with the search party throughout the day. They returned just after nightfall, their expressions grim. Nathan found Susannah waiting anxiously in the parlor, her face pale with worry. "We found it," he said without preamble. "The stagecoach went off the road at a sharp turn, about halfway through the pass. It looks like an axle broke, sending it down a ravine." "And the passengers?" Susannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's expression softened with sympathy. "2 bodies were recovered, the driver and a man matching the description of the Sacramento businessman. Both had died in the crash. There was no sign of the drummer or Mrs. Walker." "No sign at all," Susannah pressed, her heart racing. "No belongings, no trail leading away from the wreck." "The snow has covered most evidence, but we found a woman's valise among the wreckage. Marshal Davis is bringing it to town tomorrow. He thinks you should look through it, see if anything seems familiar." Susannah nodded, though the prospect filled her with dread. What if she recognized nothing in the valise? Or worse, what if she did, and the memories that returned were painful ones? Nathan seemed to read her thoughts. "You don't have to do this alone," he said gently. "I'll be with you if you want." "I'd like that," Susannah admitted. "Though I feel as if I'm continuing to impose on your kindness." "It's not an imposition," Nathan said, his voice suddenly fierce. "Not at all." The next day, Marshal Davis arrived with the recovered valise, a battered leather traveling case that had somehow survived the crash relatively intact. Susannah sat at the dining room table, staring at it with trepidation while Nathan and the marshal waited silently. "Whenever you're ready, madam," Marshal Davis said kindly. "No rush." With trembling fingers, Susannah unlatched the case and lifted the lid. Inside lay neatly folded women's clothing, 2 shirtwaists, a skirt, undergarments, and a nightgown, all of good quality but not luxurious. There was also a small writing case containing stationery, ink, and a pen, a Bible with no inscriptions, and a daguerreotype in a small frame. Susannah lifted out the photograph with bated breath. It showed a young woman, undeniably herself, standing beside a seated older man with a stern expression and graying hair. There was no warmth between the subjects, no sense of affection in the formal pose. "Is that your husband?" Marshal Davis asked. Susannah shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. The age difference. He looks old enough to be my father." She turned the frame over, hoping for an inscription, but found nothing. Next, she examined the writing case. The stationery was plain, with no monogram or address. She was about to close it when she noticed a folded letter tucked into a small pocket. Unfolding it with care, she found a brief note written in a firm, masculine hand. "Susannah, your position at the Virginia City School is secured. Quarters have been arranged at Mrs. Edgerton's boarding house for respectable ladies. Report to Headmaster Collins upon your arrival. Regards, J.W." "J.W.," Susannah murmured. "Walker, perhaps. A brother-in-law or family friend rather than a husband, possible," the marshal agreed. The letter confirms you were indeed heading to Virginia City to teach. That's something, at least. Susannah nodded, though the confirmation brought her little joy. Nothing in the valise sparked any genuine recognition, no flood of returning memory. Just more questions, more fragments that refused to form a coherent whole. "There's one more thing," Marshal Davis said, reaching into his coat pocket. "This was found some distance from the coach, near what might have been a trail leading down the mountain." He produced a woman's glove, fine leather now stained and torn. "It matches the other glove we found in the valise." Susannah took the glove, running her fingers over the supple leather. "So, Mrs. Walker, I survived the crash, at least initially." "And was mobile enough to move away from the wreckage," Nathan added, "which fits with how I found you miles from the pass." Marshal Davis nodded. "The theory is that you and possibly the drummer tried to find help after the crash. The drummer's body hasn't been recovered, but given the terrain and the weather that followed, it's unlikely he survived." "But I did," Susannah said softly. "Somehow I made it far enough for Nathan to find me." "Providence has a way of working things out," the marshal said, tipping his hat as he prepared to leave. "I'll continue making inquiries about Mrs. Walker, see if there's anyone who might know more about her circumstances. In the meantime, madam, I suggest you keep that valise close. Sometimes familiar objects can trigger memories when you least expect it." After the marshal departed, Susannah sat quietly, the contents of the valise spread before her like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked gently. "I should be grateful," Susannah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know who I am now, or at least who I'm supposed to be, but it still doesn't feel real. It's as if you're telling me about a stranger named Susannah Walker." Nathan pulled his chair closer to hers. "Doc Palmer says that's not uncommon with memory loss. The connection to your past self is missing, even when you learn facts about her. But what if it never comes back? What if I never truly know who Susannah Walker was, what she loved and feared, who she cared for?" She looked up at Nathan, her eyes swimming with tears. "Am I still her, even without those memories?" Nathan reached out, hesitating briefly before covering her hand with his own. "You're you," he said simply, "with or without the memories. The person you are right now, the one who discusses books passionately, who's learned to ride Daisy like she was born in the saddle, who makes Mrs. Fenton laugh with stories you don't even realize you're remembering. That person is real. And that's what matters." His words touched something deep within her, easing the ache of emptiness she'd been carrying since waking in the snow. "Thank you," she whispered, turning her hand to grasp his, "for everything." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Mrs. Fenton's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. "Dinner in 10 minutes. Mr. Quinn, would you check if there's more firewood needed in the dining room?" Nathan reluctantly pulled his hand away, clearing his throat. "I should." He gestured vaguely toward the door. "Of course," Susannah said, equally flustered. "I'll just put these things away." As she carefully repacked the valise, Susannah felt a curious mixture of emotions. Disappointment that the contents had triggered no memories, relief that at least she had a name and a destination now, and something more complicated regarding Nathan Quinn, a feeling she was increasingly unable to ignore. Over the next 2 weeks, life at Quinn Ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Susannah continued to help Mrs. Fenton with household duties, insisting it was the least she could do in exchange for their hospitality. She also spent time with the contents of the valise each day, handling the clothing, reading and rereading the letter, studying the photograph for clues to her past. Nothing triggered a meaningful memory, though occasionally she experienced fleeting sensations, the smell of chalk dust when she touched the writing case, a momentary feeling of confinement when she held the gloves. Nathan, meanwhile, divided his time between ranch work and helping Susannah in her quest to recover her past. He rode into town several times to check for messages at the telegraph office, but no further information about Susannah Walker emerged. The drummer's body was eventually found by hunters, confirming he had indeed perished in the wilderness after the crash. "I should go to Virginia City," Susannah announced one evening as they sat by the fire. Headmaster Collins might know more about me, and there might be records at the school or boarding house that could help. Nathan frowned, staring into the flames. The passes to Virginia City are still treacherous this time of year. It would be safer to wait until spring. But that's months away, Susannah protested. I can't impose on you that long. It's not an imposition, Nathan insisted, as he always did, and rushing into danger won't help you recover your memories. It's not just about the memories anymore, Susannah admitted. It's about having a purpose, a place in the world. The school is expecting Susannah Walker. There are children waiting for a teacher. They'll have found a replacement by now, Nathan pointed out, and even if they haven't, you don't know if you're actually qualified to teach. You don't remember your education, your training. But I do know literature and history, Susannah countered. I can read and write and calculate. Surely those skills didn't appear from nowhere. Nathan's expression darkened. So you're determined to leave then? To travel to a city where you know no one, to take up a position you're not certain you can fulfill, the edge in his voice surprised her. I have to do something, Nathan. I can't stay here indefinitely, living on charity. Is that what you think this is, charity? Nathan stood abruptly, pacing before the fire. After all these weeks, you still don't understand. Understand what? Susannah asked, bewildered by his sudden intensity. Nathan turned to face her, his expression raw with emotion. That I don't want you to leave. That the thought of you traveling alone to Virginia City or anywhere else makes me sick with worry. That having you here has made this house feel like a home again, in a way it hasn't since my parents died. Susannah's heart pounded in her chest. Nathan, I know it's too soon, he continued, his words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. I know you're still searching for your past, still trying to make sense of who you are, but I also know that these weeks with you have been the happiest I can remember. And selfish as it might be, I don't want them to end. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Susannah found herself rising from her chair, drawn to him as if by some invisible force. It's not selfish, she said softly, not when I feel the same way. Nathan's eyes widened. You do? I do. Susannah took another step toward him. Every day I wake up hoping my memory has returned, but also dreading it, afraid that remembering might mean leaving here, leaving you. Nathan closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. Whatever you remember, whatever you discover about your past, it doesn't have to change this, us. But what if there is someone waiting for me? Susannah voiced the fear that had been haunting her. What if I made promises I don't remember? Then we'll face that when it comes, Nathan said firmly. But until then, until we know more, can we acknowledge what's happening between us? Can we allow ourselves that much? In answer, Susannah rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Nathan pulled her closer, his arms encircling her waist. It felt right, felt like coming home in a way nothing else had since she'd opened her eyes in the snow. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Susannah smiled. So have I. She hesitated, then added, I don't know what the future holds, Nathan. I don't know who I was before. But I know who I am now and who I want to be with. That's enough for me, Nathan whispered. That's more than enough. The weeks that followed were filled with a joy neither had anticipated. As winter slowly gave way to the first hints of spring, Susannah and Nathan's relationship deepened into something neither could deny. They rode together daily, explored the ranch boundaries, and spent evenings by the fire, sometimes talking until the embers died to ash, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence, hands entwined. Mrs. Fenton watched their blossoming romance with quiet approval, though she occasionally reminded them of the need for propriety. I'm not so old I've forgotten how young hearts work, she told Susannah one afternoon as they prepared dinner. But folks will talk if they think there's anything improper happening under this roof. There's nothing improper, Susannah assured her, blushing nonetheless. We're just getting to know each other, Mrs. Fenton replied skeptically. And that's why Mr. Quinn has been walking around grinning like a fool for weeks, I suppose, just getting to know each other. Despite Mrs. Fenton's teasing, there was truth to Susannah's words. She and Nathan were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries, both aware of the unusual circumstances of their situation. Nathan never pressed for more than Susannah was ready to give, and she, in turn, was honest about her lingering concerns regarding her lost memories. "What if I remember something that changes everything?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "What if I'm not the person you think I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Nathan replied, his arm around her shoulders. "You're the woman who beats me at chess 3 games out of 4, who reads poetry to Mrs. Fenton while she knits, who can outride most of my hands despite claiming she doesn't remember how to saddle a horse." Susannah laughed. "That's who I am now, but before." "Before doesn't matter as much as you think," Nathan said gently. "We're all shaped by our pasts, yes, but we're not defined by them. We choose who we become every day." His philosophy comforted her, though the nagging uncertainty never fully disappeared. The rare headaches that still plagued her occasionally seemed to intensify when she tried too hard to remember, as if her mind itself was resisting the effort. March arrived, bringing milder weather and the first wildflowers pushing through the melting snow. With the improved conditions came an increase in traffic through Genoa, including stage coaches now running regularly again. One such stage brought a letter addressed to Mrs. Susannah Walker, care of Nathan Quinn, Quinn Ranch. Susannah stared at the envelope, her heart racing. "It's from Virginia City," she said, recognizing the postmark. "Someone knows I'm here." With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting matched that of the note found in her valise, the mysterious J.W. "Dear Mrs. Walker," she read aloud, Nathan standing tensely beside her. "Word has reached me of your survival after the tragic stagecoach accident. I trust this letter finds you recovered from your ordeal. I regret to inform you that the teaching position at Virginia City School has been filled in your absence, as the education of our children could not be delayed. However, should you still wish to relocate to Virginia City, I am confident another suitable position could be arranged. Please advise of your intentions at your earliest convenience. Regards, James Walker, School Board Trustee." "James Walker," Nathan repeated. "So he is a relative?" "It seems so," Susannah said, scanning the letter again, "though he writes so formally." "Perhaps a brother-in-law, as we speculated before." "Does the letter trigger any memories?" Susannah closed her eyes, concentrating on the feeling of the paper between her fingers, the sight of the handwriting. "Nothing specific," she admitted, "just a sense of obligation. As if this James Walker is someone I owe something to, but not someone I feel particularly close to." Nathan took the letter, examining it thoughtfully. "He doesn't express much personal concern for your well-being, considering you nearly died in that accident." "No, he doesn't," Susannah agreed, finding the impersonal tone suddenly troubling. "And he signs it with his full name and title as if we're hardly acquainted at all." "Or as if the relationship is strictly professional," Nathan suggested. "Could he be a former employer, perhaps?" "Someone who arranged the teaching position as a favor, possibly." Susannah frowned, a fragment of memory tugging at the edges of her mind. "The name Walker, I don't think it was always my name. It feels recent." Nathan's expression sharpened with interest. "As if you took the name when you married, maybe." Susannah pressed her fingers to her temples where a headache was beginning to form. "I wish I could be certain." "Don't force it," Nathan advised, seeing her discomfort. "Doc Palmer said memories can't be rushed." Susannah nodded, lowering her hands. "You're right, but I should respond to this letter, at least to inform Mr. Walker that I won't be coming to Virginia City." "You've decided that, then?" Nathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes." Susannah met his gaze steadily. "Whatever my past connection to Virginia City or James Walker, my future is here, if you'll have me." The tension left Nathan's shoulders as a smile spread across his face. "There's nothing I want more," he said softly, "but are you certain?" "Without your full memories, I'm certain of how I feel now, Susannah interrupted. The rest will come in time or it won't. Either way, I choose this life. I choose you. The kiss that followed sealed her declaration, a promise more binding than words alone could express. The next day, Susannah composed her reply to James Walker, politely declining the offer of a position in Virginia City and explaining her decision to remain in Genoa. She didn't mention her relationship with Nathan, keeping the letter as professionally courteous as the one she'd received. There, she said, sealing the envelope. That's done. Nathan, who had been watching her from across the study, came to stand beside her chair. No regrets, none, Susannah assured him. Though I do wish I understood the nature of my connection to James Walker. It seems significant somehow. Perhaps he'll reply with more information, Nathan suggested. Now that he knows you're alive and well, he might be more forthcoming. Susannah nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Something about James Walker's letter had unsettled her, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Still, she pushed the concern aside, focusing instead on the future she was choosing to build with Nathan. That future became more concrete the following week, when Nathan formally asked for her hand in marriage. The proposal came during a ride to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, where wildflowers had created a carpet of blue and gold across the meadow. I know it's soon, Nathan said, holding both her hands in his. And I know there are still unanswered questions about your past, but I love you, Susannah. I think I've loved you since I found you in the snow, and if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Tears filled Susannah's eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak for a moment. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, I'll marry you, Nathan Quinn. The engagement was celebrated that evening with a special dinner prepared by Mrs. Fenton, who wept openly when they shared the news with her. Nothing would have made Thomas and Alina happier than to see their son find such joy, she declared, raising her glass in a toast. With spring advancing rapidly, they set the wedding date for early May, when the weather would be reliable enough for guests to travel from surrounding areas. The ceremony would be held at Quinn Ranch, with the local minister officiating and the entire community invited to share in the celebration. As the wedding preparations progressed, Susannah found herself increasingly busy with planning and organizing. The activity was welcome, giving her less time to dwell on the gaps in her memory that still troubled her occasionally. Though no further communications had come from James Walker, she sometimes woke from dreams where a stern voice called her by another name, dreams that faded before she could grasp their meaning. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan rode to Carson City on business, leaving Susannah to oversee the final arrangements for new curtains being sewn for the ranch house. She was in the parlor with Mrs. Fenton discussing fabric choices when the sound of an approaching carriage drew their attention. "Are we expecting visitors?" Susannah asked, moving to the window. "Not that I know of," Mrs. Fenton replied, setting aside her sewing. The carriage that pulled up outside was finer than any Susannah had seen in Genoa, a well-sprung covered coach with matched bay horses and a liveried driver. From it descended a man in an expensive suit, his bearing one of authority and confidence. "Oh my," Mrs. Fenton murmured. "That's quite a fancy visitor for Quinn Ranch." Susannah felt a sudden, inexplicable dread as the man approached the house. Something about his silhouette, the way he carried himself, it stirred a memory she couldn't quite grasp, like the echo of a half-forgotten nightmare. The knock came firm and commanding. Mrs. Fenton moved to answer it, but Susannah found herself frozen in place, her heart racing with an anxiety she didn't understand. "Good afternoon," the visitor's voice carried clearly from the entryway. "I'm looking for Mrs. Susannah Walker." "I believe she's staying here, and who might be asking?" Mrs. Fenton replied, her tone protective. "James Walker," the man answered, "her brother-in-law." The name broke Susannah's paralysis. She moved to the entryway, steeling herself for whatever was to come. The man standing at the threshold was in his 40s, distinguished-looking with salt and pepper hair and a meticulously groomed beard. His eyes, a cold blue, fixed on her with an expression that sent a chill through her body. "Susannah," he said, his voice softening slightly. "Thank God you're alive. We've been so worried. We, Susannah questioned, her voice steadier than she felt. The family, of course. James Walker stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, removing his hat. When we received your letter declining the position in Virginia City, I knew I had to come in person. There must have been some misunderstanding. Mrs. Fenton glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. I'll make some tea, she said, tactfully withdrawing to the kitchen. Alone with James Walker, Susannah gestured toward the parlor. Please, let's sit down. Once seated, she studied the man who claimed to be her brother-in-law, searching his features for any spark of recognition. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but nothing that triggered a clear memory. You don't remember me, do you? James asked, his tone more calculating than concerned. I'm afraid I don't, Susannah admitted. The doctor believes I suffered a head injury in the stagecoach accident. My memories from before then are gone. James leaned forward, his expression intent. All of them. You don't remember anything about your life before the accident, just fragments. Impressions, really, nothing concrete. A slow smile spread across James's face, and Susannah felt her unease deepen. How convenient, he murmured, almost to himself, then more loudly. Well, I'm here to bring you home, Susannah, to help you remember who you really are, and who am I according to you? Susannah asked, an edge creeping into her voice. Susannah Walker, widow of my late brother Edward Walker. He passed away last summer after a brief illness, leaving you comfortably provided for but, unfortunately, with few practical skills for supporting yourself. The teaching position in Virginia City was arranged as a favor to help you establish independence. The explanation was plausible, and it aligned with the few facts Susannah had pieced together. Yet something about James Walker's manner, the calculating look in his eyes, made her doubt every word. If that's true, why did you wait so long to come looking for me? She challenged. The stagecoach disappeared months ago. The winter was harsh, the passes impassable, James replied smoothly, and initially we believed there were no survivors. It wasn't until your letter arrived that we knew you had survived. We, Susannah repeated. You keep saying we, who else is concerned about my welfare? Edward's mother, your mother-in-law, is still living, and there are other family interests involved. James waved a hand dismissively. The details aren't important right now. What matters is getting you back to Sacramento, where you belong. I belong here, Susannah said firmly. I've made a life in Genoa. In fact, I'm engaged to be married next month. James's expression hardened. Engaged to whom? Nathan Quinn. The man who found me in the snow, who saved my life. Ah, I see. James's tone turned condescending. You've allowed gratitude to confuse you into thinking it's love, understandable given your condition but hardly a basis for marriage. Anger flared within Susannah. My feelings for Nathan have nothing to do with gratitude. I love him and he loves me. We're building a future together. A future based on what? He doesn't know you, Susannah. He can't not when you don't even know yourself. James stood, pacing before the fireplace. And what will happen when your memory returns? When you remember your obligations, your promises? What obligations? What promises? Susannah demanded, rising as well. If you're truly my brother-in-law, if you truly care about my welfare, then speak plainly. Tell me what it is you believe I've forgotten. James stopped pacing, turning to face her with an expression that sent ice through her veins. Very well, plain speaking it is. Before Edward died, you signed certain papers transferring control of his considerable assets to you, with the understanding that you would, in turn, sign them over to the family business. And did I sign them over? You were preparing to, but then you had doubts. Suddenly talked of wanting independence, of teaching in Virginia City. It was agreed you would take some time to consider, but the understanding was clear. The pieces began falling into place. So when I decided to take the teaching position, it wasn't a favor to help me establish independence. It was to get me out of Sacramento, away from whatever family interests might be threatened by my control of those assets. You always were clever, James acknowledged, his pretense of familial concern dropping away. Too clever for your own good at times. Edward should never have put you in this position. A woman has no business controlling that kind of wealth. My husband thought differently, it seems, Susannah replied, the words strange on her tongue. She still had no memory of Edward Walker, no emotional connection to the man who had apparently been her husband, but she was beginning to understand the dynamics at play. Edward was sentimental, James said dismissively, and not thinking clearly near the end, but what's done is done. The fact remains, Susannah, that you have legal obligations that can't be brushed aside for some romantic fancy with a rancher you've known for a few months. I think you should leave, Susannah said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I need time to consider what you've told me. James stepped closer, his manner suddenly threatening. I'm not leaving without you, Susannah. There's too much at stake. Either you come willingly or I'll be forced to take more drastic measures. Such as, Susannah challenged, refusing to be intimidated. Such as informing the authorities that you're not of sound mind, James replied coldly. That your head injury has left you confused and vulnerable to exploitation. It wouldn't be difficult to have you declared incompetent and placed under my guardianship. The threat hung in the air between them, ugly and real. Susannah was about to respond when the front door opened and closed, followed by the sound of boots in the entryway. Susannah, Nathan called. Mrs. Fenton said we have a visitor. Relief flooded through her at the sound of his voice. In the parlor, she called back. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene before him, Susannah's tense posture, James Walker's threatening proximity. What's going on here? He demanded, moving immediately to Susannah's side. Nathan, this is James Walker, Susannah explained, drawing strength from his presence. He claims to be my late husband's brother and he's come to take me back to Sacramento. Nathan's arm went protectively around her waist. Is that so? He said, his tone deceptively mild as he addressed James. Well, Mr. Walker, I'm afraid you've had a wasted journey. Susannah isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. James's lips curved in a humorless smile. Mr. Quinn, I presume, I understand you believe yourself to be in love with my sister-in-law. A touching sentiment, but ultimately irrelevant. Susannah has legal and financial obligations in Sacramento that cannot be ignored. Any such obligations can be addressed through proper legal channels, Nathan countered. There's no need for her to leave Genoa, especially not against her will. I'm afraid it's not that simple. James turned back to Susannah. The papers you signed give you control of assets worth over $50,000. Without your signature releasing those assets back to the family business, we face potential ruin. Nathan's eyebrows rose at the sum mentioned, but his support never wavered. That sounds like a problem for your family business, Mr. Walker, not for Susannah, especially given that she has no memory of these arrangements. Convenient amnesia, James sneered. Perhaps that's what she's told you, Mr. Quinn, but I wonder if it's the truth. Something in his tone sent a chill through Susannah. What do you mean? She asked warily. I mean, my dear sister-in-law, that I find it curious how selective your memory loss seems to be. You've forgotten your husband, your family connections, your financial obligations, everything that would tie you to Sacramento. Yet you've retained your ability to read, write, ride a horse, all the skills that make you useful to your new protector. The insinuation was clear and deliberately insulting. Nathan stepped forward, his expression thunderous, but Susannah placed a restraining hand on his arm. You're suggesting I'm lying, that I've fabricated memory loss to escape obligations I no longer wish to fulfill. Susannah asked, her voice cold with anger. I'm suggesting it's a possibility worth considering, James replied smoothly. One that a court might find persuasive, especially when weighed against the testimony of respected Sacramento citizens regarding your mental state following Edward's death. Get out, Nathan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Get out of my house now before I throw you out. James held his ground for a moment, then nodded as if conceding a minor point. Very well. I can see this conversation is becoming unproductive. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it on a nearby table. My room at the Genoa Hotel is written on the back. I'll be staying for 3 days, Susannah. Think carefully about your situation, about what's at stake, not just for you but for Mr. Quinn as well. False accusations can be damaging to a man's reputation. especially in a small community like this. With that parting threat, James Walker collected his hat and left, the sound of his carriage departing a momentary relief in the charged atmosphere he left behind. Nathan turned to Susannah, his face etched with concern. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though in truth she felt shaken to her core. "He's lying," she said, "or at least not telling the whole truth, I'm sure of it." "I believe you," Nathan said without hesitation. "But his claims about legal documents, about your control of assets, those might have some basis in fact." "I know." Susannah sank back onto the settee, suddenly exhausted. "And if they do, I need to understand exactly what I signed and what my legal obligations truly are." Nathan sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "We'll figure this out together. First thing tomorrow, I'll ride into town and speak with Judge Hamilton. He's retired from the bench but still knows the law better than anyone in the territory. He can advise us on how to proceed." Susannah squeezed his hands gratefully. "What if James is right about one thing? What if my memories do return and I'm not the person you think I am?" "It doesn't matter," Nathan said firmly. "I love the woman you are now, the woman you've been every day since I found you. Whatever your past holds, it doesn't change that." His unwavering faith strengthened her, but as the day wore on, Susannah found herself plagued by doubts. What if she had made promises she could no longer remember? What if there were legitimate claims against assets she controlled? And most troublingly, what if James Walker's threats weren't empty? What if he could indeed have her declared incompetent based on her memory loss? That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, turning over the fragments of memory that had surfaced during James's visit. There had been something familiar about him, something that had triggered a visceral reaction of distrust. Was it merely a response to his threatening manner, or was it a genuine memory trying to break through? Toward dawn, Susannah finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, only to be jolted awake by a dream so vivid it left her gasping. In it, she stood in a darkened room beside a bed where a gaunt man lay dying. James Walker stood on the other side, his face a mask of false concern as he pressed a paper into the dying man's hand, guiding his fingers to sign. "It's for the best, Edward," James said in the dream. "Susannah will be taken care of, I promise." The dying man, Edward, her husband, looked at her with desperate eyes. "Don't trust him," he whispered. "Not with anything, especially not with you." Susannah sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The dream had felt so real, so specific, not like a nightmare, but like a memory breaking through the fog. Edward's face, gaunt with illness but still handsome, with kind eyes that had once looked at her with love. James's false concern, the papers being signed while Edward was clearly not in his right mind. She dressed quickly, determined to share this breakthrough with Nathan. By the time she reached the kitchen, he was already there, discussing plans with Mrs. Fenton for his trip to town. "I remembered something," Susannah announced without preamble, "or at least I think I did. A dream, but it felt like more than that." She described the scene in detail: Edward's deathbed, James's manipulation, Edward's warning. "I think James coerced Edward into signing something while he was dying," she concluded. "And I think Edward warned me not to trust James with anything." Nathan's expression was grave. "If that's true, it changes everything. It suggests James may have been trying to manipulate Edward's assets even before his death, possibly through fraudulent means." "And now he's trying to manipulate me," Susannah agreed, "but why wait so long? If these papers are so important, why didn't he come looking for me immediately after the stage coach went missing?" "Maybe he hoped you were dead," Mrs. Fenton suggested bluntly. "Forgive my plain speaking, but if what you remember is true, your death would have been convenient for him. No one to contest whatever he had Edward sign." The thought was chilling but made a terrible kind of sense. And when he received my letter declining the Virginia City position, he realized he couldn't ignore my existence any longer. "We need legal advice," Nathan said firmly, and quickly. "I'll leave for town within the hour." While Nathan was gone, Susannah tried to coax more memories from her reluctant mind. She sat with the items from the valise spread before her, handling each one and concentrating on any feelings or images they evoked. The Bible yielded nothing, nor did the clothing. But when she reopened the writing case, she noticed something she'd missed before a false bottom in one of the compartments. Her heart racing, Susannah carefully pried it open. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. She opened it with trembling fingers to find a brief note in an elegant, masculine hand. "My dearest Susannah, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you have discovered my hiding place as I hoped you would. Do not trust James with the papers I signed. He will try to convince you they were my wish, but they were signed under duress when I was too weak to resist. The true documents, the ones expressing my actual wishes, are with Harrington and Sons in Sacramento. Show them this note, and they will know what to do. All my love, now and always." Edward. Tears filled Susannah's eyes as she read and reread the note. This was proof that her dream had been a memory, that James was indeed attempting to defraud her. And more than that, it was evidence that Edward had truly cared for her, had tried to protect her even after death. When Nathan returned late that afternoon, he brought Judge Hamilton with him. The elderly jurist examined Edward's note with interest, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "This is compelling evidence of attempted fraud," he confirmed. "And if there are indeed legitimate documents held by Harrington and Sons, they would supersede anything signed under duress." "But how do we prove it?" Susannah asked. "James will simply deny everything." "We don't need to prove it just yet," Judge Hamilton replied with a small smile. "We simply need to make him believe we can. That should be enough to send him running back to Sacramento, where the real battle can take place on more favorable ground with Harrington and Sons' support." The judge helped them craft a carefully worded letter to James Walker, informing him that Susannah had recovered certain memories and documents that cast doubt on the legitimacy of the papers he sought. It suggested that any further attempts to coerce her would result in serious legal consequences, possibly including criminal charges. "This should buy us time," Judge Hamilton said as he prepared to leave. "But eventually, Mrs. Walker, you'll need to travel to Sacramento to address these matters directly. Not immediately. We can arrange for preliminary communications with Harrington and Sons by telegraph, but eventually." Susannah nodded, accepting the inevitability. "I understand, and thank you, Judge, for your help." After the judge departed, Susannah and Nathan sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid hues of orange and pink. The day's revelations had brought clarity but also new complications. "I'll have to go to Sacramento," Susannah said softly. "Not immediately, but soon. To meet with Edward's lawyers, to understand exactly what he left me and what responsibilities come with it." Nathan nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "I know, and I'll go with you if you'll have me. You would do that, leave the ranch, for you, without hesitation." Nathan turned to face her fully. "Susannah, nothing has changed about how I feel. If anything, today has only made me more certain. I love you, and whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together." Tears welled in Susannah's eyes. "Even if it means dealing with a fortune I didn't know I had. With business interests I don't understand, with a past that's still mostly blank, even then," Nathan assured her. "Especially then." The letter was delivered to James Walker that evening by one of the ranch hands. By morning, his carriage was gone from the hotel, his hasty departure a clear indication that Judge Hamilton's strategy had worked at least for now. "He'll be back," Susannah said as they received the news. "Or there will be legal challenges from Sacramento. This isn't over." "No," Nathan agreed. "But we've won the first battle, and we'll be better prepared for the next one." In the days that followed, more memories began to surface for Susannah, small details about her life with Edward, fragments of conversations, impressions of Sacramento society. None were as clear or complete as the deathbed scene, but together they began to form a mosaic of her past. Edward had been kind but often distant, 20 years her senior and more interested in his business affairs than in building a deep connection with his young wife. They had married when she was 22, a match arranged more for convenience than love. Her parents, struggling financially after her father's business failed, had encouraged the match with the wealthy widower. It wasn't a great love affair, Susannah explained to Nathan one evening as another piece of her past fell into place. But Edward was decent to me in his way. He gave me freedom to read, to learn, to develop interests beyond being a society wife. And toward the end, when he was dying, I think we developed a genuine affection for each other. Nathan listened without judgment, understanding that these recovering memories were important for Susannah to process. And what about before Edward? Do you remember your childhood, your parents? Susannah concentrated, finding that these earlier memories were beginning to resurface as well. My father was in shipping in San Francisco. He lost everything in a bad investment when I was 19. My mother, she took it hard. She had been raised in luxury and couldn't adjust to reduced circumstances. And your maiden name, do you remember that? West, Susannah said with sudden clarity. Susannah West, that's who I was before I became Susannah Walker. The recovery of her maiden name felt significant, a key piece of her identity reclaimed. Susannah West. A young woman from San Francisco who had married for security rather than love, who had found herself widowed and at the mercy of unscrupulous relatives, who had chosen a new start as a schoolteacher in Virginia City, and who had instead found herself lost in the snow, found by a cowboy who promised to help her remember home. West, Nathan repeated with a smile, it suits you. As May approached, wedding preparations continued despite the complications introduced by Susannah's recovering memories and the looming issues in Sacramento. After long discussions, they decided to proceed with the wedding as planned, then travel to Sacramento immediately afterward to address the legal matters with Harrington and Sons. It will be stronger if we face them as husband and wife, Nathan pointed out practically. Less opportunity for James to challenge your competence or try to control your decisions. Susannah agreed, though she worried about the burden her newfound wealth and the accompanying legal battles might place on their marriage before it even began. I never imagined bringing such complications into our life together, she confessed. Neither did I, Nathan admitted with a wry smile. But I'd rather have you with complications than anyone else without them. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Harrington and Sons, responding to the inquiry Judge Hamilton had sent on Susannah's behalf. It confirmed that the law firm indeed held documents signed by Edward Walker prior to his death, documents that contradicted whatever James had coerced him into signing later. The firm requested Susannah's presence in Sacramento at her earliest convenience, but assured her that her interests would be protected in the meantime. See, progress, Nathan said encouragingly, and confirmation that your memories are accurate. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the Sierra Nevada mountains standing like sentinels against the blue sky. Quinn Ranch had been transformed for the occasion, with wildflowers decorating every surface and tables set up on the lawn for the celebration to follow the ceremony. In the guest room that had been hers since that first night, Susannah prepared with Mrs. Fenton's help, donning a simple but elegant ivory dress ordered from Carson City. Her hair, arranged in soft curls, was adorned with a crown of wildflowers gathered that morning. You look beautiful, Mrs. Fenton said, blinking back tears. Like you belong here, like you always have. Thank you, Susannah whispered, her own eyes damp, for everything, for making me feel welcome from the very beginning, as Mrs. Fenton left to take her place for the ceremony. Susannah stood alone before the mirror, studying her reflection. The woman who looked back at her was both familiar and strange. Susannah West, Susannah Walker, soon to be Susannah Quinn. Different names, different chapters of a life that was finally beginning to feel whole. There were still gaps in her memory, still pieces missing from the puzzle of her past. But the essential parts had returned enough for her to know who she had been and, more importantly, who she wanted to be. A soft knock at the door announced Nathan's arrival. Breaking with tradition, he had insisted on escorting her downstairs himself. No father to give you away, he'd explained, and I like the symbolism of us walking toward our future together from the very beginning. He stood in the doorway now, handsome in a new suit, his eyes filled with love as he took in the sight of her, "Ready?" he asked simply. Susannah crossed the room to take his outstretched hand. "Ready," she confirmed. They descended the stairs together, stepping out into the May sunshine to the smiles and applause of gathered friends and neighbors. The minister waited beneath an arch of wildflowers, his Bible open and ready. As they exchanged their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever challenges life might bring, Susannah felt the last pieces of her fragmented self falling into place. This was where she belonged. This was home. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and enough food to feed the entire county. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch, Nathan pulled Susannah away from the festivities for a moment of privacy on the porch. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, resting her head against his chest. "Though I'm a little nervous about Sacramento." "We'll face it together," Nathan reminded her, "just like we promised today." "Together," Susannah agreed, lifting her face for his kiss. The journey to Sacramento the following week was long but uneventful. They arrived to find the city bustling with activity, a sharp contrast to the quiet rhythms of Genoa. Nathan had been to Sacramento several times on ranch business, but for Susannah, it was both new and hauntingly familiar streets and buildings triggering flashes of memory as they passed. The offices of Harrington and Sons occupied a dignified building near the Capitol. Mr. Harrington himself, a contemporary of Edward's with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, received them warmly. "Mrs. Walker, or should I say Mrs. Quinn now," he said, shaking Susannah's hand. "We were devastated to hear of the accident, then overjoyed to learn of your survival. Edward would be pleased to know you've found happiness." "Thank you," Susannah said sincerely, "and thank you for safeguarding the documents he entrusted to you." Over the next several hours, Mr. Harrington explained the contents of Edward's true will and the associated legal papers. Edward had indeed left Susannah in control of a substantial fortune, with the majority of his business interests to be managed by trusted associates, but the profits and final decision-making authority resting with her. There were generous bequests to several charities and to loyal employees, but nothing at all to James or other family members. Edward was quite explicit about his brother, Mr. Harrington explained. He believed James had been siphoning funds from the business for years and didn't trust him with any control. The documents James tried to have Edward sign on his deathbed would have reversed this, giving James effective control of everything. "And what happens now?" Nathan asked. "James still believes those deathbed documents are valid." "They're not," Mr. Harrington stated firmly. "We have evidence they were signed under duress, and Edward's earlier will, properly witnessed and executed, takes precedence. James has already been removed from any position within the Walker businesses. If he wishes to challenge the will, he can do so in court, but he would almost certainly lose." "And my role in all this?" Susannah asked, still trying to absorb the scope of the responsibility Edward had left her. "I'm not a businesswoman. I don't know the first thing about managing these interests." "Edward anticipated that," Mr. Harrington assured her. "The businesses are run day to day by competent managers who report quarterly on operations and profits. You have final approval on major decisions, but you needn't be involved in daily operations. Your primary responsibility is to ensure the profits are distributed according to Edward's wishes, with the majority going to you as his widow." It was overwhelming, but not as intimidating as Susannah had feared. With Nathan beside her, asking practical questions and taking careful notes, she began to see how they might incorporate these new responsibilities into their life together. Their time in Sacramento stretched to 2 weeks as they worked with Harrington and Sons to understand the full extent of Susannah's inheritance and her legal obligations. They visited the Walker residence, a mansion on a fashionable street that felt completely foreign to Susannah, despite having been her home during her marriage, and met with the business managers who would continue handling daily operations. To Susannah's relief, James made no appearance, though Mr. Harrington informed them he had indeed consulted another law firm about challenging the will. They apparently advised him against it, the lawyer said with satisfaction. The evidence against him is too strong. On their final night in Sacramento, Susannah and Nathan dined at the city's finest restaurant, a celebration of sorts before returning to the simpler life of Quinn Ranch. It's strange, Susannah mused as they enjoyed their meal. A month ago, I couldn't remember who I was, and now I'm supposedly one of the wealthiest women in California. It doesn't feel real. None of it changes who you are, Nathan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You're still the woman I found in the snow, the woman I fell in love with, the woman I married. The money is just a complication we'll manage together. A rather substantial complication, Susannah pointed out with a smile, though I have some ideas about that. Nathan raised an eyebrow inquiringly. Oh, I've been thinking about Genoa, about the school there. It's overcrowded, underfunded. The children deserve better. Susannah leaned forward, enthusiasm lighting her eyes. What if we used some of this money to build a proper schoolhouse? To pay for a qualified teacher for books and supplies? Nathan's face broke into a broad smile. I think that's a wonderful idea. Edward's money helping to build the community where you found your new home, there's a rightness to that. And there are other needs, Susannah continued, warming to the subject. The clinic could use expansion, and the road between Genoa and Carson City is nearly impassable after heavy rains. We could help with those improvements too. Nathan repeated, his eyes soft. I love that you see it that way. Of course I do, Susannah said simply. Everything I have is yours too. Everything we do together. The following day, they began the journey back to Quinn Ranch, both feeling a sense of relief as Sacramento receded behind them. The legal matters were not entirely settled. There would be quarterly reports to review, occasional decisions to make, perhaps even future challenges from James or others, but the immediate crisis had passed, and they could return to building their life together. As the ranch came into view after days of travel, Susannah felt a surge of emotion. This was home now in a way the grand Sacramento mansion had never been. This was where she had found herself, or rather, where she had built a new self from the fragments of the old. Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn, Nathan said softly as they crossed onto Quinn land. It's good to be home, Susannah replied, meaning it with all her heart. The years that followed brought changes to Quinn Ranch and to Genoa itself. True to her word, Susannah used a portion of her inheritance to fund improvements throughout the community, a new schoolhouse, an expanded clinic, better roads. She and Nathan established a foundation to manage these charitable efforts, ensuring the money would continue to benefit the region for generations to come. Quinn Ranch prospered under their joint management, with Nathan handling the day-to-day operations while Susannah oversaw the financial aspects, applying the business acumen she had developed through managing her inheritance. They expanded the property, improved the breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as San Francisco. Their family grew as well. A son, Thomas Edward Quinn, arrived a year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elena Rose. Both children inherited their parents' love of the land and of books, growing up surrounded by the natural beauty of the Sierra Nevada and the intellectual richness Susannah and Nathan cultivated in their home. Susannah's memories continued to return in fragments over the years, though some periods of her past remained forever shrouded in fog. But as Nathan had once told her, the past didn't define her. It was the life they built together, the choices they made each day, that truly mattered. On the 5th anniversary of the day Nathan had found her in the snow, they rode together to the spot where their story had begun. The landscape looked entirely different in summer lush with wildflowers and grasses instead of blanketed in white, but Nathan had marked the location carefully in his mind. It's hard to believe it was here, Susannah said, dismounting to stand in the meadow, that I was so lost, so empty. Not empty, Nathan corrected, joining her, just waiting to be found, Susannah smiled, taking his hand. As were you, I think. As was I, he agreed, drawing her close. The sun warmed their faces as they stood together in the place where their journey had begun, where a lost woman with no memory had been found by a cowboy who promised to help her remember home. A promise kept, though home had turned out to be not a place from her past, but a future they had built together. "I love you, Nathan Quinn," Susannah said softly. "And I love you, Susannah Quinn," he replied, his voice holding the same wonder it had the first time he'd said those words. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after. In the distance, Quinn Ranch stood bathed in golden light, a beacon guiding them home not to the past Susannah had lost, but to the future they had found together.